Welcome everybody, it's Telman. In this video we are going to be talking about the Afterlife arcade again, and what we're exactly going to be talking about is how the Afterlife arcade is inside the Afterlife theater, being the theater our characters win in the intro cutscene to Zombies in Spaceland. So this may relate to my theory that I'll get into later in this video, but first things first, just for everybody to have an understanding, let me first explain that the Afterlife theater is the theater that we see our characters go into in the intro to Zombies in Spaceland, and of course inside this intro you can see an arcade in the background. And of course if you continue through this intro, then you would see that our characters get sucked up into the films, and of course they go and just start going through the films. But the thing is that when our characters die inside these films, they go into something called the Afterlife arcade, and how this relates is because the theater that they went into was called the Afterlife theater, and it had an arcade in it, so it only makes sense to call the arcade from the Afterlife theater to be called the Afterlife arcade. And this is something I theorized for a while, but finally I believe we got some confirmation for this, and where we got this from is actually some quotes from Willard Wyler that I'll be playing in just a second. But there's some quotes you can only hear if you're playing as Elvira and you go to the Afterlife arcade, but I'll play a couple of them and then of course I'll explain why this makes sense right after.
Finally off of your little velvet casting couch, I see. There's no couch in here, my dear, but you'll get used to it. They all do. I was certain that we could get something usable from your death, but you've proven once again, like most of Hollywood, to be nothing more than a talentless push-up bra with no brains.
So as you guys heard in those quotes, you could hear Willard Wyler saying some quotes which we actually hear in different parts, but I'll get into that in just a second. But you hear him talking like something like through a wall or something, and the reason why you hear it like this is because it's when you're Elvira and you're in the Afterlife arcade. And what's even more interesting is that these exact same quotes that you hear from Willard Wyler can be heard by Elvira when she's in the Afterlife arcade, except in his normal voice. But for some reason this time, and I'm not too sure exactly how you trigger this, but for some reason this time, instead of having his weird ominous sounding voice, this time he just sounds like he's talking through a wall. And of course, where was the last place we saw Willard Wyler? He was in the Afterlife theater. Of course, the Afterlife arcade being inside the Afterlife theater, he's still inside that building, so he's just shouting at us from the door. And personally, I believe this confirms this theory, and it makes even more sense with my greater theory of our characters being dead this entire time. If you guys haven't checked out that video, I'll link it for you guys to go check it out. But anyways, pretty much the theory goes is that our characters have been dead from the start, and that's why we see the Afterlife theater being called the Afterlife theater, because they're just in the afterlife and there's all these different afterlife things, and one of those things in the afterlife is the Afterlife theater. And of course our characters get sucked into it. This even makes more sense with the cipher that we got from Zombies in Spaceland, where it says death is merely the beginning. Of course, if our characters just died, then they show up to Willard Wyler's thing, and of course it's just the beginning for them because they just died and they're going to go through this large journey during the afterlife. So it would explain a lot inside this theory, and of course would explain why when our characters die inside the films, they return to the Afterlife arcade, because the Afterlife arcade is inside the actual afterlife. But anyways, tell me what you guys think about this. You guys agree with this theory? Of course, I believe you have to at least agree that the Afterlife arcade is inside the original world where they came from, whether that to be the actual afterlife or just be their original world. But anyways, that's about it for this video. If you guys did enjoy this video, go ahead and thumbs up, and if you guys want to stay tuned for content similar to this, go ahead and subscribe. But I'm going to go, and I will catch you guys on my next video.